want to get the record started because so that I can screen share and make it happen. Do you guys see my sidebar? Should I minimize that so that you don't see it?
No, it's good. Which side, mean of all the people going down the side?
Yeah.
That's good. We want to see that. That's perfect. So then we can scroll through, see what people are doing.
Oops.
See who's there and who's not.
You should be able to, you should have that on your own. There we go. I'm just going to move it over like that.
Oh, that's good. I just wish we could see more at once. And you know, that's what we can do too, Elise, when we get to the questions, the comment part, you know, we can show the slide of the comment and then show it, then take the PowerPoint away and then show everybody's face. You want to do that so that we can all see each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that good? Is that great? Okay.
Absolutely.
I see Bonnie Playcoast is there. Am I pronouncing that right, Bonnie?
It's kind of, so let me test this because, you know, we were going to have me answering questions while we were going. And so do you now see the question on my screen?
No, wait a minute.
Only showing the, is it only showing the PowerPoint or is it showing the question box open?
I don't, oh, Q&A, sure. It says no open questions, but it's open. I can see it. So
Yeah.
all you need
That
to
means I can't be doing that at the same time. I
No.
was controlling a slideshow.
You won't need to do it. I'll be scrolling through that.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know. Carolyn is attempting to speak. I see her hands moving, but nothing else. No, there we are now. Yeah.
No, I'm just talking to my pals here.
Okay. I was.
And is the chat deactivated or gonna leave that?
Chat works for the panelists. It doesn't work for anybody outside of the panel.
Got it.
I didn't know you could see, when the slide is up, I didn't know you could see all the panelists.
Uh-huh.
That's going to change my behavior in some other board Zooms.
Okay, it's 3:30. So if everybody's ready, I'm going to start the webinar.
Is Lynda there?
Yep. She's been here for a bit.
Oh, I see her. Okay.
You all may want to mute your mics now, unless you're called upon. Here's some fire station activity going on. Lynda, the meeting has started. Would you? Oh, I guess I should start with the.
No, I start with the first slide. This one.
With the Pledge of Allegiance. Or do you,
not yet.
Okay.
It's the second.
All right,
slide.
BJ, you're in charge.
All right. Tell me when it's going to start. Is it starting now?
It has started.
All right. Thank you so much, Elise. Well, I just want to welcome everybody to Sonoma County's virtual meeting on strengthening coastal and adjacent fire agencies. And I'm BJ Bischoff, and I'm helping Supervisor Hopkins and Elise facilitate today's meeting and several meetings that we'll be having in the future. We're really delighted that you've joined us this afternoon, and we look forward to having the leadership from some of our 5th district fire agencies and CalFire share their thoughts with you today. And I know that some of the members of the public are here as well. And we just thought it would be great to get everybody all together, kind of have everybody hear everyone's thoughts so that we can talk about the future of fire protection in our district. But before we go any further, let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it's common for us to do that. And for anyone who's on the call with speaking privileges, if you go ahead and unmute yourself, I'd really appreciate it because I'd really like to hear as many voices as possible during our pledge. So if we can go ahead and get started. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to have the opportunity to do that with you. Supervisor Hopkins, it's all up to you right now.
Thank you so much. And I just want to start by saying thank you so much for being here virtually this afternoon. And thank you to Elise for both helping organize this meeting, as well as also reaching out and talking to stakeholders ahead of time to help us plan this meeting. I do want to start this meeting with a couple of disclosures. Number one, I think that many of you have probably heard me say this before, but I don't believe in arranged marriages. I don't believe in it for women, and I don't believe in it for fire chiefs either. And so the goal of this meeting is not to say go here or partner up with this agency. I really don't believe that that's the role of the county or, quite frankly, of LAFCO. I really believe that the leadership and the vision for the future has to start from the community and really come from the fire experts, which means the board members and the fire chiefs who live in the communities that they serve. So the goal of this process is really to create a commonly embraced strategic vision that will provide for funding and service provision stability in the face of the growing needs that we see in our communities. Once there's a shared vision for the future that comes from all of you, I will do absolutely everything I can to help move that plan forward. And just to give a little bit of a brief moment to explain why we're having this meeting at all, this process really began after the 5th District team took a field day up to Timber Cove and the Sea Ranch, during which we met with Fire and Emergency Services, among other community nonprofits. And this initiative is in direct response to the request from those communities to facilitate this kind of a process. And I do want to note that, there's a reason that I'm not facilitating this process, that we have actually brought in a third-party impartial observer to help facilitate this. So it's really not about the county's vision. It's really not about LAFCO. This is about all of you, and that is what BJ is really here to do. So some of the things that we're going to start to do today, we're going to start this process by giving the fire agencies an opportunity to share their thoughts on what they have, what they need, and what might work for them going forward. We wanted to hear everyone's initial thoughts, and then we're planning on following up with at least 2 more meetings with the leadership of the fire agencies to figure out what might work best to serve the emergency needs of our 5th District communities. And we also want to talk to you a little bit later about, is it important, for instance, to hold those meetings in person, even though we know there's also a lot of driving time involved, for those of us along the North Coast and in West County. We also want to just recognize the need for effective fire services has never been greater, and you all have been doing an absolutely phenomenal job of providing for your communities, often on a shoestring budget, often on a volunteer basis, and I want to thank you for your service today. But I also want to acknowledge the challenges that you all have faced and the responsibility that I feel to support your work and to support your sustainability and your vision into the future. And then I want to, before handing it back to BJ, explain why and how we are working with BJ Bischoff of Bischoff Consulting today, and a little bit about BJ. She's based in Sonoma County, and she has a decades-long career of facilitating public meetings and helping groups make important decisions on really, really tough topics. I actually had the opportunity to work with her around homelessness in the Lower Russian River. Hard to imagine a more controversial subject than that, but it did lead to successfully distributing about $1 million of funds to local community nonprofits and actually making a dent in homelessness and seeing a reduction in the Guerneville area. So she's also worked with Supervisors Gorin and Gore after she worked with me on homelessness. And she also helped us last year facilitate an important public conversation around climate change. And perhaps most importantly, her father was actually a volunteer firefighter for more than 30 years, and her mom was an ambulance dispatcher. So her heart is definitely in this conversation, and she brings a real passion for public service and in particular for fire services to this conversation. So with that, I am going to go into listening mode because I am really here to listen to you all today, and go ahead and hand it back to BJ.
Thank you, Supervisor Hopkins. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're in for today. We're going to hear from 6 different fire agencies, and then during the presentations, even though we're going to have time later for public comment through the Q&A feature, if you feel like you want to go ahead and type anything in the Q&A function, feel free to do that throughout the whole program today. We also want to let you know that we've disabled the upvote function. I don't know if we've done that or not. So that if you like someone's comments, instead of using the upvote, just go ahead and type that you like the comments. It's a lot easier to monitor that way. And we're going to give you a short stretch break because like 2 hours is a long time to go with just like sitting in one place, especially for those of us who are pretty active and move around a lot. And then we're going to start back up again, asking for your input on some important questions that we're going to pose to you. And then we are going to read some of those important questions out, and some of you may respond to those right away. Supervisor Hopkins may want to make some comments on those. But even though we may not have time to get to every single question or comment in the Q&A, know that it will be part of the public record and part of the report that we'll be putting together, because we'll be summarizing all this for you. So that's a little bit about what we're doing today. I also want to mention that we like for all of you to use respectful language. Probably don't have to say this in this crowd, but when I do cannabis cultivation ordinance meetings like this, I do have to say that. And I want to ask you to refrain from personal attacks. So if you'll do that, that would be really great. So let's talk about who is here today, what those different agencies are. And we've got a map that Elise has put together for us. So we've got Cazadero Volunteer Fire Department is in the house. We've got Fort Ross Volunteer Fire Department, North Bay Fire. We have Monte Rio Fire Protection District. We've got the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District. We have Timber Cove Fire Protection District, and we've got CalFire with us today. So we'll get to hear different perspectives, a little bit about where you are, where you want to go, just so that we kind of hear in one place at one time what everybody's thinking about for the future, what they want, what they don't want. And you may be undecided in terms of your future. And that's what this is all about. This is a process to really figure out what makes sense for all of us together, and for you as individuals as well. So that's who's participating today. And before we get started talking to hearing from any one particular fire department, I want to tell you about a decision that was made by the Board of Supervisors in January. And we've got a slide that shows that. And there are more decisions that were made, more agreements, but the ones that apply to this discussion, we just wanted to make sure we had a baseline here that everybody would see that. So, and although you're probably very familiar with this, I just want to make sure that we put it out there. So the first one, and Supervisor Hopkins, you might want to make a comment or two on these, since you obviously were part of that discussion. The first agreement that was made was about the Gold Ridge Fire Protection District, including the annexation of counties of CSA 40 territory. And you all know it to be Fort Ross, Camp Meeker, Bodega, Valley Ford, Two Rock was in that, Wilmar, and Lakeville Volunteer Fire Company. So that was one agreement that was made. Another one was the annexation of the Sonoma County Fire District of the Bodega Bay Fire Protection District. And then the third one that was made was to have the Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District involved in the annexation of CSA 40 territory, Geysers area, and that's a little bit out of the area we're talking about, IRP 61, 63, and Fire Services Area 64, along with Dry Creek, Sotoyomi Community Facilities District as well, CFD, you know, what is that? Supervisor Hopkins, is there anything you want to mention about this? Because I know that was something you were very involved in.
I think that probably most folks, on this call are pretty familiar, but happy to answer any questions that folks might have, later in the conversation. And I will say this was an unprecedented, obviously, amount of money being invested into fire services. And I also want to acknowledge there are outstanding needs on the North Coast. And so that's the conversation that I look forward to having with all of you.
Okay, great. All right. So keep in mind, if there are any questions that you have about that or anything, how that interplays with what we're talking about today, we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later if you want to. So we reached out to, I know that Elise and some of the District 5 team folks reached out to all of you to get a sense of what your thoughts were as far as way things are now, what they could be in the future, et cetera. And the things that we noticed across all of the districts was this. We noticed that there is a level of service is number one. Everyone said that it's really, the services are great, and that we really collaborate across the district to provide the responses that we need to provide to protect our community. So that was one thing that came out as we saw across the board. We also saw that we've got a heroic level of service as fire season timing and severity is rapidly growing and increasing, and that fire season is expanding as we know. Everyone seemed to think that we've got an aging volunteer base, and I just did some work up in Mendocino County. They're experiencing the same thing on the North Coast up there as well. I think everybody is. Competition for staff is impacted by a lack of affordable housing. That's no surprise to anybody. Strong collaboration across agencies on call response is happening. A lot of help, a lot of support throughout the district. We're also seeing an impact of public lands on service needs and funding. And I don't know if that's something that Supervisor Hopkins wants to address at another time, or even after we're done with the slide here, but that's something that I don't know if you want to mention that. Distance leads to long response times from EMS services, and there's really a need for capacity support in terms of people need training, vegetation management, things like that, ongoing support. Is there anything, Supervisor Hopkins, you want to say about the impact of public lands on service needs and funding, particularly?
Just the acknowledgement that we know that so much of sort of the property on the North Coast has been taken off of the tax rolls. And so that impacts your ability, to have revenue sources. And there may be more of those acquisitions actually coming as well.
Great. And it's just really taking a long time sometimes for ambulances to arrive. And because we're finding that sometimes the ambulances based in Guerneville or Bodega Bay are in fact closer than some of the other vehicles. So just wanted to point that out, but that's what we see across the board. That's what everybody seems to be saying. The other thing that we want to point out is the difference between the rural fire model and what happens in urban settings. And what you experience, as you know, is very different from in an urban setting from what happens in Santa Rosa. And we really, in a rural fire model, focus more on community fire prevention, plus prescribed burns, inspections, you've got community involvement you're dealing with, you've got vegetation management. These are things that aren't necessarily happening in urban areas. And you've got, from what we're finding across the board, is there's usually about 2 people on the rig with one volunteer or a stipend. And then of course you've got great distances between where you need to be and where you're going. So a lot of geography between the calls. So that's what we're seeing is in that rural fire model across the board. So those are things we just wanted to kind of lay out there. Now we want to get started talking about the different fire agencies that are with us today. And this is feedback that we've gotten, that the districts have provided, the agencies have provided themselves. So I'll go ahead and just give you a summary of what we've heard, and then we're going to turn it over to the folks on the call from those districts to clarify what we're saying, to really give us your opinion about what you have already, what you need for the future, what you're thinking about. And again, nothing needs to be solidified at this point, just to kind of give us a sense. So we're looking at Cazadero to get started. And as we know, Cazadero provides fire and emergency services, and they've got street lighting and maintenance of a community park because they're a community services district. So they've got a lot going on. And that to feedback that we've heard, to reorganize with another fire protection district, they would need to seed the other 2 services with those agencies and entities. So it's a little bit of a different scenario. So that's something we wanted to bring up. And Cazadero struggles with volunteer firefighter availability, as so many others of you do, particularly during weekday daytime hours. Also, what we've heard from the district is that the district has and does rely on mutual aid support from Monte Rio for 2 years. I think the county's paid about $250,000 per year to have CalFire staff the Cazadero station for the full year rather than just for wildfire season. But I think that program may have ended. I'm not sure about that. I think it may have ended. Cazadero's primary station is seismically deficient and is in need of rebuilding and replacement. Now, as far as future concerns that Cazadero has shared with us, the district doesn't have a parcel tax and has concerns that their community might not support one. And also residents could protest, and reorganization proposal would prefer to keep the district independent. So that's the feedback that we're hearing from Cazadero. And they're saying that the district faces the same challenges as others in regard to volunteer availability. I just wanted to reiterate that. Now, the district is talking about the challenges of reorganization and of especially moving from a CSD to an FPD to accommodate any kind of a reorganization. And they believe that the district residents may really be opposed to parcel taxation. So that's where Cazadero stands from what we're seeing. But I'm going to turn it over to the board president of the Cazadero CSD, Paul Barry. to tell us a little bit about your thoughts, what you're thinking, clarify a little bit about what we've said, if you want to share that with us.
Well, I think that you summarized it quite well. Like all of our neighboring agencies, we're all struggling with staffing. Of course, the whole country right now is struggling with employee shortages, whether it's the fire department or our restaurant industry or anything else. So the people just aren't there, and the other challenges are so many vacation rentals. So many homes are being sold as vacation rentals. So our local families that have children, their children cannot afford to buy a home in the neighborhood that they grew up in. So trying to have our kids as follow in our footsteps has been increasingly challenging. That being said, since so many of these homes are now being sold as vacation rentals, we're not enjoying the revenue stream that comes back from hotel tax that can help offset some of it, because a lot of their call volume goes back not just to residents. Our residents are generally fairly self-reliant. However, our call volume tends to be more of the people that come up for the summer for vacation rentals and that sort of thing. So we're getting vacation rentals, but we're not getting the revenue back from that rent. I think it's cyclical. I think that yes, our volunteers are aging, but it's cyclical. And if we can get our young people engaged and able to stay in the community, just like bell bottoms, everything comes back. So,
Anything else, Paul, you want to share with us?
We are a community services district. Our district was formed in 1963. It has worked well for the community. The community had, we balance our budget every year. We do okay financially. Yes, we do have some structural issues based on today's modern building codes about the earthquake retrofit issues. But outside of that, all of our equipment is paid off and we don't owe anybody anything. So yes, if we could get some additional help, we do our fair share of grant writing here to fund special projects. But yeah, if there was more revenue generated again from hotel tax funding, that will be a great help in offsetting stipend pay.
Okay, thanks for that. That's a great idea, and of course, that's something that's I think happening countywide with the vacation rentals. So thanks for sharing that.
We don't have any new homes being built in Cazadero, so we're not getting the tax money. The only increase in our taxes comes from when a house sells, and of course with not a lot of homes in this area, we're not selling a lot of houses, so our rate of income stays relatively flat. So that's why some of this other funding is important to get back.
Got it. And it's good to know you do the grant writing too. Thank you for letting us know about that. That's great. We're going to move on to Monte Rio now. You okay with that, Paul? Anything else you want to mention? You good? All right, let's move into Monte Rio. And the information that we got from Monte Rio is that they respond to 1,000 calls a year, which is a heck of a lot of calls. When Elise told me that, I'm like, are you sure that's right? That number's right. And sure enough, there's an awful lot, a lot of work that they're doing there. Monte Rio recently passed a parcel tax and has taken on some paid professional staff to meet the weekday and the daytime staffing needs that we just talked about having difficulty filling with volunteer positions just a bit ago. Monte Rio is in preliminary but substantial discussion with Gold Ridge Fire Protection District to consider reorganization under like a West County agency with a volunteer staff model. So I want to hear a little bit about that in just a bit. And the future concerns that Monte Rio shared with us is that they're heavily dependent on their longstanding volunteer fire chief, who's also a leading first responder, not only within their service area, but in the lower river itself. And despite Chief Baxman's capabilities, they're saying the district needs to plan for post-Baxman era. I've had the opportunity to meet him, and I see his name in the newspaper all the time. And he seems to be everywhere all the time. So we're delighted that that he's part of the fire district. Now, as far as reorganization, the district has entertained multiple rounds of discussions with neighboring agencies regarding potential reorganizations. Nothing set in stone, but for the moment, they're focused on the possibility of consolidating under the Gold Ridge umbrella. But again, that's just everything's still in the works. The district's not interested at this point in service solutions that involve extended CalFire coverage, noting that those proposals can be expensive. And the fact that CalFire crews can be pulled to support wildfire response, CalFire can talk about that a little bit later, leaving local communities uncovered possibly during those times of emergencies. So just want to let you know that that's what they've been telling us from Monte Rio. And Monte Rio is open to investigating some greater collaborative relationships. So let's hear about some ideas that Monte Rio might have, anything in addition to what we shared. And I think we're going to hear from our Monte Rio board president, Dan Fine.
Hi there. Well, thank you for that introduction. You had the picture of our fire station, and one of the things we didn't mention was that our station 2 is seismically challenged. And the concern is that in an emergency situation, that doorway might bend and we wouldn't be able to get any trucks out. So that's one of those things that the dollars are so high that we aren't even seriously looking at anything at this point. But we are putting aside money, and we've had the good fortune of a volunteer fire chief, which has allowed us to bank a lot of income that we would otherwise be spending on a leadership role. And also we've been getting a fair amount of revenue from strike teams as they go out in the summer. So we're financially very sound for the moment, but the succession plan for our chief is paramount. I mean, one of the things that having a superhero chief hides is the fact that you have a superhero chief. So if he were not here, things would look very different for us. So we've been actively, and I would say for almost 2 years now, talking to Gold Ridge with the thought of consolidating with them. If I can share a screen here, I can show you a map that might help visualize that. Is that something I can do? Yeah, let me see. No, I have to, somebody has to let me do that.
I think Elise can do that. Can you do that? She's amazing.
I think you have to make me a co-host or something like that. Well, while we're waiting for that to work. So, the other challenges that we have, staffing is always an issue. We did pass a parcel tax a couple of years ago, which allowed us to hire, to have one full-time paid person on staff all the time. And we've supplemented it with a stipend program. So, and then of course, volunteers. We have been successful at keeping staff in the station most of the time with those two things: one paid and a stipend. Am I sharing? Sure.
I think at least just go ahead and stop the PowerPoint. I think.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
If you just stop the PowerPoint.
Do that.
Yep, we're good.
I'm just going to bump you off here. Okay. So you should be seeing the mitigation map.
Yeah.
And I just drew a picture around, and this became clear when Goldridge agreed to take management of the CSA 40s around them, VFCs rather. And so you can see, here's Gold Ridge, here's all of the area that they are now going to be responsible for, and Camp Meeker down here and Fort Ross up here.
Hmm.
So this is Monte Rio in between. So this would make two separate, two uncontiguous areas, but closely managed. We're not very far apart, and to have a station in the middle of all this for a reach out to here would give Goldridge an advantage in being able to manage these areas. So it's a good combination, we think, for both districts, and would provide beneficial assets in both ways, and essentially for us a succession plan. So and the other thing in our thoughts about that is that it may make sense for even more of the districts in between to join up in this endeavor if this works. But we've been focusing on just working with two districts to minimize all of the complexities that come when you have more than two. So and we think that if we can make this work, it may be attractive to other districts to join in. So that's I'll just stop the share here and let you have the PowerPoint back.
That's great. And I don't know if everybody has that map, but if you just want to go ahead and email that to Elise, that would be great. And then she can make sure everybody on the call will get that. At not this minute, but
yeah,
at a later point when she sends follow-ups out. That'd be great. It was helpful for me to see that too. That was great. Thanks. Anything else, Dan, you want to share at this point?
I think that's enough for the moment. But yeah, happy to continue on this conversation.
That's great. So we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and we're now looking at North Bay Fire, Fort Ross Station 43. And basically, it's our understanding that they respond to about 60 or so calls a year. And North Bay Fire and the county have a funded contract. We might talk a little bit more about what that is in just a little bit. And there's a small rate base and large geography for this particular agency. There are 4 stations reaching over large areas, and they're saying it would be really ideal if they could add a station, a resilience center with ADA access, evacuation, Wi-Fi, community space. It'd be really nice to kind of add to what they already have. But I don't have a whole lot of information for you, so I really thought I would just go ahead and turn it over to, I think I'm going to turn it over to Steve Genesi, if I'm not mistaken. And also, I think probably also Damien Bounet, and there's a couple other folks here too. So why don't we get started with Steve? Do you want to tell us what you're thinking here, some thoughts on what you have, what you're wanting for the future, and then let us know who else on your team wants to give their thoughts.
Yeah, I think primary and foremost is for North Bay Fire Station 43 to be able to continue with at least the level of service we have been accustomed to providing our community members. One of the hallmarks of these consolidation discussions going back many years was no reduction in service. So that is a primary goal. The only way we can provide service from a practical standpoint with our low call volume is with volunteers. So we must be able to maintain a well-trained cadre of volunteers. Paid firefighters in the Fort Ross service area is not something that we're likely to see in the near or even distant future. So we need to be associated with an organization that recognizes the rural nature of our service area and can continue to help us provide the service to our community. And again, I got to reinforce that the volunteer component is key to what we do here, and they must be maintained. A new station, ADA access, Wi-Fi, et cetera, is certainly a valuable asset. The fire stations that we use today are not compliant in the new world. So that's about it for now.
Okay. Anybody else on your team want to share their thoughts? Steve, you want to pick on anybody?
Oh, we might ask Damien Bonnet, our board president, to make a comment if he so chooses.
Thank you, Steve.
Hearing nothing
Yeah.
so far, maybe Steve Shane is with us and like to make comment. Okay, well, I guess we'll leave it at that for now, and I'm sure Chief Schroth-Terry would like to make some comment on our behalf also.
Steve Shane has his hand raised.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
just,
think that Damien is in attendees, not panelists, and that's our problem.
Damien just needs to raise his hand to be allowed to talk, and I just gave Shane talking permit, so Steve, you should be able to. Oh, Damien has raised his hand as well, so.
Yeah, this is BC Shane here. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay,
We
perfect.
can't see you,
Yeah.
but we can hear you.
Yeah, it's fine. So basically, reiterate what Janesse said, but the key thing out here is we can go a long time without a call, and then we can just be on call after call after call because it's just completely erratic out here. So having a full-time staff, you would have people go a week without hearing the pager go off, and then it'll go off 3 times in one night. So, it's just very erratic, very, very remote. We don't have any paint on any of our roads out here. The best, control we have is a stop sign every, 40 miles. And it's just, very, very rural. The addresses don't match anywhere near where the actual parcels are. And it's pretty chaotic. So whoever we do eventually partner up with, they'll just have to understand the very bizarre nature. It's completely different than anything you would ever see in town.
Thank you. Painted a very good picture of what you're dealing with. Thank you. We've got hands raised. We've got Chief Shepley.
Good afternoon. There's a few points I'd like to make, and you've already started to make some of them. One of the more important ones is that we are currently in contract with North Bay Fire, or I'll back up because it is a bit of a history lesson to understand all the nuances of what's occurring with Fort Ross, North Bay Fire, and Goldridge. It dates back to 2018. There's been a series of contracts to manage North Bay Fire, and that's a contract between North Bay Fire and Goldridge. That contract is made possible with a contract between the county and North Bay Fire. So we're in this role where we are managing the remaining CSA 40 fire stations. As you all saw on the map that Dan Fine presented. And then you also mentioned the funding agreement that was passed, and we are currently in the process of reorganization. We've presented 2 draft applications to LAFCO. So I'm not here to say, hey, we're not presenting maybe the best option for Fort Ross, but it's the option that we have currently in place, and we're well down the road to do that. So I guess it's a matter of acknowledging that contract, what's in place is really important to me and really important to the work that North Bay Fire's done. So that's one point I want to make. But again, our goal is to find the best situation for everyone. But that includes exploring, and it's not the sole reason that we're exploring a relationship with Monte Rio, but it is certainly part of why we're exploring that. I have a vision or some areas of improvement that need to be made to the North Coast. I think we all agree on them. And I don't know that I necessarily need to talk about the challenges and areas of improvement that we need to make. But I believe that the area of fuels management is a significant area of improvement that needs to be made. And then we've already talked about the many challenges that we all share as far as retention and the labor force. Facilities is absolutely an issue. Training is an issue. And I believe a larger organization brings strength. And I think that's the viable solution for the coast and a lot of fire districts currently is to be larger, have a more diverse work location and more diverse workforce. And I think it's necessary for survival for all of us. I had a few other notes, and let me just, again, the focus has been pointed out in the slides, but also our focus is finding the right fit and best level of service for the community. So we're certainly not trying to get in the way of that, but we have been working very hard to increase the level of service in Fort Ross and throughout the CSA 40 areas. And this conversation has honestly been a bit of a distraction in our process to complete our consolidation process. But again, our goal ultimately is to find the right fit for everyone and provide the best level of service to the community.
Thank you for that. I see that, Damian, you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. I think that BC's Janesse and Shane covered a lot of what I would say, and Shepley as well. Chief Shepley also covered a number of things that were on my list. I would like to add that in addition to volunteer firefighters, EMT only volunteers, support volunteers, and a strong community bond are very important for the Fort Ross region. It's just part of being a community that is so spread apart and where the residents are not very close to each other. And then additionally, I wanted to highlight, and Shepley spoke to this, that we really need to have a future where our fire department is able to work with the community directly toward fire prevention and vegetation management. We need to be part of a larger entity that has the potential to meet our needs while understanding the models required to provide service to other communities and recognizing how these different approaches can work together to meet the needs of the entire region. That's all I've got for right now.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate your comments on that, and we can be discussing them in greater detail just a little bit. But let's go ahead and move to the next fire district. So we're looking now at North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, and our understanding from what we've heard from these folks is that they have 2 stations staffed with volunteers and CalFire, and the district is able to provide solid service within the territory through the use of the CalFire contract. They've got the volunteers, they've got ALS, ambulance coverage from Coast Life Support. They also have a pretty stable volunteer ranks. They say that their facility, their vehicles and equipment are in pretty good shape, and their finances are currently sufficient and stable. Now, the concerns that they have for the future seem to be that the expectation that additional funding will eventually be required to maintain that CalFire contract, probably within 5 to 7 years. And they anticipate engaging with the residents in the area to consider authorization of some kind of a special tax if needed. They're telling us that they have a strong desire to see neighboring agencies, particularly Timber Cove, remain viable, and no resources. They don't have any resources to take on fire prevention, vegetation management responsibilities. We just talked about that a minute ago. But they'd like to devote more resources to community emergency planning initiatives, and they'd like to seek administrative support sometime in the future. Now, in terms of an agency reorganization, they don't see an operational, leadership, or administrative need that would lead them to seek any kind of a reorganization with the neighboring agency. The district is telling us that they understand that Timber Cove and Fort Ross may face operational challenges in the future, but the geographical distance from their service area would preclude any operational advantage to consolidation in their perspective. So they also believe that the growing Northern Sonoma County FPD and District 5 could develop fire prevention, vegetation management programs that would be worthy of people replicating in the territory. And they'd like to think that consulting with them or entering into some kind of a contractual arrangement could accomplish that, that imperative. They've proposed an idea to add additional CalFire staffing out of the Sea Ranch station. And an additional staffer could probably post up to Timber Cove during weekday, daytime hours, providing better coverage for both agencies, is what they're saying. But they don't have funding for this proposal, and they wouldn't be able to fund it until after they would pass in kind of a special tax, which would be devoted to addressing increasing CalFire contract costs that are kind of caught in the middle there. So let's hear from Chief Bonnie Plakos about that right now, to share a little bit about what I've just said, any clarification, any thoughts that you have going forward. Chief Plakos.
Yeah, yes. Hi, BJ. Yeah, thank you for that. I do have to give some corrections to start with, because we sent a lot of corrections to what was on the slides initially.
I probably didn't get them all.
And it doesn't look like any of them got in there. So just to clarify, we have 4 stations, not 2. Only one of them is staffed. We are financially okay for 2 to 3 years, but then we are definitely going to need additional funding from somewhere to sustain our contract. And that's just to sustain. And we do need additional funding to do any kind of improvements. Things have been going good, but we're still, doing all of our admin work with volunteers, and we need to be able to have some paid admin. And we would like to be able to improve things and be able to do things, as you mentioned, like help support the community with vegetation management projects and help them seek grants for that and things like that. And that's something that is really needed out here. And we just can't do because we don't have the people to do it. I want to emphasize that we do have a partnership with CalFire. We have what's called a Schedule A contract, which means we contract with we have some CalFire people that are here full time, all the time. They don't go away. They're not on the state mission. And that is a very beneficial relationship. We've had it in place since the early 1970s. And that's one of our high priorities, to make sure that we can sustain that, because it really works well in this environment and it helps to support the volunteers. Because that has worked so well in this area. Again, we don't want to be in the business of telling other districts what they should do, but we think a similar model, if the funding could be found, would work very well for the other rural agencies on the county. We strongly support finding a way to have increased CalFire engagement on the coast. We do not have a specific advocation for a lot more staff at our station. If that happened, that might be fine, but it seems like it would make a lot more sense to be able to have that staffing somewhere between Sea Ranch and Jenner. As you did, you were correct. Just the whole idea of reorganization or consolidation, we are always open to talk about that, and if we can find solutions that raise everybody's boat, we're all ears. But we reject the idea that consolidation just for consolidation's sake, or a forced marriage, as Lynda called it, make any sense. So we look at it as a tool, not a goal. But we are always willing to talk. But on anything we've talked about so far, we've been talking about this for years with agencies, and we have never been able to come up with something that actually is a benefit. We can only come up with things that cost more and don't fix anything. So as you mentioned, we are very concerned about our neighboring agencies, and we want them to be sustainable, and we would like to help with that if we can, part of a solution if we can. Or share how our relationship with CalFire works if we can, if it helps another agency. And just to mention it, especially since Chair Barry mentioned it, we are sorry that we generate a lot of transient occupancy tax out here, and apparently especially after next year, none of it is going to come back this way. We think that's inappropriate, and we hope to get that fixed. I think I've covered we've been very successful at maintaining our volunteer staff. We're older than most, very kind of similar to Fort Ross, and we've been successful at that. But it's always a risk, and then anything we do has to always support the volunteers, because as Chief Genesi said, we can't respond to big incidents out here without a bunch of people. Chair Gardner, do you want to add anything? Our board chair is on.
No, the only thing I was going to add was the set in place age of our volunteers, since this is primarily a retirement community and there's not that many working folks, but you have covered that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Chief, for sharing that. I did not realize that your Schedule A contract has been in effect since your relationship with CalFire since 1970. So thank you for letting us know that.
Yeah.
And I apologize that I reduced the number of stations by half, but I really do have 4. So I take that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. All right, let's look at the next district, which is Timber Cove. And I'm going to summarize to the best of my ability what I'm hearing from what Timber Cove has shared with us. They are also experiencing an aging volunteer force, as well as declining availability of volunteers for some time. And again, that's nothing new to all of us. And they have a volunteer stipend program, which was funded by the county for 2 years. It did improve volunteer commitment and availability, but sadly that program has ended. And the program cost was on the order of about $300,000 per year. And it may be possible to get some of the benefits of the program for maybe a lower degree of funding as a possibility. The funding issue, the district has passed a parcel tax, though low number of private parcels means insufficient community, insufficient funding, of course, like we heard before. Community fundraising for maintaining its station vehicles and equipment is happening. For example, a recent fundraising drive supported installation of new roofing on the station house, so that they've been involved in some kind of community fundraising efforts. Future concerns that Timber Cove has is that they've always considered volunteer staffing as their biggest challenge. Existing volunteers and the community that they're drawn from are aging. Younger people can't afford to relocate to the area. Again, we could probably say that pretty much anywhere. And Timber Cove has always thought that their best hope for maintaining service levels would be to contract CalFire coverage in the area, maybe by maybe improving their station, which lacks accommodations and proper engine bay ventilation, and ceding the facility to CalFire as a possibility. For reorganization, they're saying they're not opposed to any potential reorganization proposal, but they see no particular operational benefit to regional agency consolidation. And the district does recognize that a larger regional agency may have a greater voice in influencing the county and the state to address any service shortcomings that they experience. The Timber Cove is very interested in North Sonoma Coast proposal for upstaffing CalFire in the Sea Ranch with an aim to provide coverage down into their district. They don't have any means of funding such a proposal in any meaningful terms, however, and the district's prepared to lobby for support of the CalFire staffing proposal, and otherwise they're going to seek to improve the station house and hope that it could one day be staffed by CalFire. So to clarify on anything that I think I've heard from you all, we've got, I know Carolyn Apps, the board president, is there, and I know that the fire chief, Eric Lynn, is on. So Carolyn, do you want to get started first, giving your comments, and then we'll move over to the chief? If the chief
Sure, and I'm actually board treasurer.
Oh,
Could you move back a slide, please?
Sure. And you're the treasurer. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure. The fire district, first as volunteer fire department, has been in existence about 50 years. And our biggest strength, absolutely biggest strength, is our community, because the community has funded all of our engines, the firehouse, all of the ancillary equipment and materials that we need, all the personnel equipment. And of course, a lot of this is aging, and they've really stepped up. We have the largest parcel tax in the county for emergency fire and medical services. So we've done what we can do to try and increase our funding sources. We get about $5,000 on average from Sonoma County now that stipend is gone. We get about $92,000 a year from our parcel tax, our latest, our combined taxes, and that's about $652 per year for the single family dwelling. And that's comparable to what Bodega did have. The community donations and fundraising is variable. It's about $60,000 a year, but this last year the Volunteer Fire Department Foundation collected $170,000 from our incredible community. And what we really want to say is that over 50 years in our district and everywhere else, the county of Sonoma has saved millions of dollars in salaries that all of these volunteers have donated. I mean, that's an incredible statistic that I don't see captured in many places. I feel like sometimes I've thought of as the chirping birds in the nest, always wanting but never giving, and they give tremendously. When we look at the map that you shared before, we look at the north and west rugged rural terrain and feel that this is like-minded territory, that the people who live in these rural areas have like-minded cultures, and they understand that the delivering volunteer services has commonalities. So we would really welcome a coalition where each individual area keeps their identity, but works together to be a block that is different from the grassland southern part of the county. And we also share along the coast that all important Highway 1 as evacuation routes, whether you go north or south, and it's pretty difficult to go east. So I think we share those problems, and we need to have regional solutions. And one of the things that we lose, again, we now have a new dispatch fee of $13,000 a year. We keep the Highway 1 and the parks cleared and open in all kinds of weather, when we know that Caltrans and the parks have taxpayer-funded fees to do that kind of work. But in fact, we do that work most often, and we are not paid for that out of their budget. We also send about $750,000 a year to a TOT that leaves our area and doesn't come back. We'd like to talk about that. We love our tourists, we support them, but they have their problems. So our desired outcome really is to look at the very successful Sea Ranch and Bodega models of a CalFire overlay, and we'd like to have that whole block looked at in our northern rugged rural communities. Thank you. Eric, do you have some comment?
Yeah, you covered most of it. What I would like to add is our district is about 48% tax exempt as far as being either state or county owned property, and that puts a real strain on our parcel tax because it eliminates a lot of the taxable real estate. And with volunteers, we have great volunteers that put in a tremendous amount of time. And when we were down between 50 to 75 calls a year, I mean, the volunteers could handle it. Now we're up between 250 and 300 calls a year. And that is too much to ask of volunteers. It's just too hard to have a life and try to maintain that. And on Highway 1, when we get an accident, it's a delayed response to get help from agencies such as Caltrans or CHP, PG&E. So we wind up doing not only handling the scene, but backing up with doing traffic control, which it requires about 6 people for us to safely do it. So that's a real strain on volunteers as well. We really are hoping we can get an increased CalFire presence. We've always had a wonderful working relationship with CalFire, That's a real positive thing for us. And still with the volunteers in this area, so many times we're told, hang a left at the oak tree or the broken underground well. I mean, and you have to be a community member to understand these directions. A lot of times dispatch will be trying to give us directions and they're just going, wow, we don't understand this. Things are really different out here. I know Fort Ross and North Sonoma coast, we all deal with a lot of these same kind of problems. And it's just something that departments in town, they don't see as much of it as we do. And I think that other than that, I think Carolyn pretty much covered everything I wanted to discuss. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And before we move on to CalFire, Chief Plecos, is there something that you wanted to say? I see your hands raised.
I did, just a minor. I feel like I fumbled one thing that I said and didn't say it very well, so I just wanted to fix it. Talking about increased CalFire staffing at our station, which we would always welcome. But there was I know solutions is later, but there was a concept that we talked about, and Chief Nichols might talk to the realness of this later. But if we, on the way to getting what a lot of Timber Cove and us would very much like, which is greater CalFire presence on the coast, maybe down towards Timber Cove, as a stepping stone to that, if we could somehow find funding for a wintertime engine at our station that could especially emphasize response to other areas in Timber Cove, that would help them out a lot, and us too, of course, because they'd be around. But that's just a suggestion that we think would be a stepping stone to better response on the coast.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So let's move into CalFire. We're going to hear a little bit from them, and then we're going to give you a chance to take a little stretch break. So let's see what we've got. We've got three models that CalFire is going to talk about that they have. One is a state mission. Type 3 engine can be deployed anywhere in the state, and the state mission takes priority. So they'll tell us a little bit about what that especially means. And some of you certainly may know about that if you've been involved with CalFire for such a long time. Amador is an example. The local pays firefighters for up to 7 months of non-fire season support, and the state provides company officers and engines. They'll get into a little bit about that as well. And then the third option is the Schedule A contract that you've heard about just a few minutes ago. Municipal Fire funds CalFire personnel, and it's not a state mission. So with us today, we have Chief Ben Nichols is going to share a little bit about those different options and kind of clear up any of those details. We're not ready for that stretch break yet. We're going to go back one slide and we're going to look at that. Okay, good. Chief Nichols, tell us a little bit about those options and how CalFire might be able to help out.
Well, thank you very much for including us in the conversation. And, you know, we're partners that have been here since the beginning, and we're going to be here for the rest of the time because the state mission is always going to be there, right? So that's some of those misnomers in the communities that there are the three true levels of CalFire response. So a fun fact for the group is that the state CalFire has 812 fire stations across the state. And only 237 of those are the state mission, what you think of when you think of CalFire with the Type 3 wildland fire engines. So that leaves 575 stations across 30 of the state's 58 counties in cooperative fire agreements. And that's where CalFire gets its all-risk mission component to it. So from Tillard Truck Companies in Riverside County to lifeguards on the beach in San Luis with crash trucks at an international airport in San Luis to rural municipal firefighting in Shasta County and here locally on the North Sonoma coast. I mean, it truly is a scalable organization depending on the needs of the local entity looking to partner with CalFire for services. So as we go through those three different levels, Station 45, Cazadero right now, is a state mission station. We did have the opportunity to have an Amador contract with the County of Sonoma for one winter to help support Fort Ross, Camp Meeker, and Cazadero as a whole. Unfortunately, that money went away, so we weren't able to continue that contract, but that provided a staffed 3-person Type 3 fire engine pumping 500 gallons a minute with your standard emergency complement to provide fire, to assist in providing fire protection in those areas for those calls for service. And so that station, now that it's not an Amador station, that engine is not required to be in quarters there if we've got state mission activity. And that could be the fuel treatment that you were talking about earlier, or statewide wildfire response. But that brings us into an Amador station similar to Station 47, our Petaluma station right now, helping Chief Shroff-Carey in the South County, where it's still a CalFire Type 3 fire engine. And while the local entity is only paying for those firefighters during the non-fire season portion of the year, we've made a commitment to that community, to that agency, to help provide fire protection, because obviously it's a year-round threat, not just a wintertime threat, right? And so we do everything in our power to leave that engine in its initial attack area at that fire station, because that crew is obviously the most familiar with that local area for calls for service as they come in through 911. However, if we find ourselves at drawdown, or we have significant fire history, because that is a state piece of equipment, it is available for the state mission. And we will do everything in our power to backfill behind that fire engine. So with the old fire that we've experienced here in the last couple of days over in Napa County, Petaluma station got sent over to the fire, but we backfilled with our Santa Rosa crew down there to cover that Amador contract, that station, to help out Wilmar and North Bay fire. So that's the nuances of the Amador deal. And that brings us to the final level, which is the Schedule A. So where an Amador is very unlikely to be unstaffed and gone providing fire protection elsewhere in the state, a Schedule A contract is a local fire department. We provide the employees to staff local entities' equipment and provide fire protection, just like Chief Lynn or Chief Plakos would, without us in place, just with CalFire personnel to assist whatever organizational structure is there. And I think that's something that's super important to us, is that in Riverside County, it's a municipal fire agency. We have ALS engine companies, ALS ambulances, tiller truck companies, the whole 9 yards. But in Shasta County, we're a combination fire department, just like we are with North Sonoma Coast, where career firefighters and volunteer firefighters are shoulder to shoulder accomplishing the mission, because there's no difference between a firefighter other than the fact that one's getting paid and one's not. They're volunteering their time. So there's some models out there where, you know, the model has to be a 3-person advanced life support fire engine. And I would argue that that doesn't necessarily need to be the case, especially when you're talking about rural communities. It's a force multiplier for the existing network of folks that are already there. So it could be a 2-person engine company that knows that they're getting their next due from up the coast, or they're getting their volunteers behind for that local call. You know, Chief Plakos, during fire season, when I used to work up on Sea Ranch during the summertime, the volunteers didn't have to roll out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning for the sprained ankle, because they knew that they had the CalFire seasonals there on the state mission engine going to that call. So it's a benefit to the community. At the end of the day, like I said, we just want to be good partners and make sure that all the different options are being looked at. The one thing that I would caution the group on with the Timber Cove component is that we'd have to really look hard at basically moving up and covering during the day. If we're responding from the South Station there at Sea Ranch down to Timber Cove, that's a pretty long response time. So, you know, I'd be hesitant to make promises there as far as whether or not that's the best fit for Timber Cove. But, you know, it's definitely something that we're interested, or we're willing to look into and talk about long term. You know, we've talked about the Caltrans facility. Unfortunately, it's not a fire station, and I don't see the department putting a new CalFire wildland engine right on the coast highway. I don't see it. But in the big picture of things, I have talked to my chief and other of my partners about looking outside the box. We get so fixated on what is here today and how do we make something today work. I would put to you that, perhaps, a new CalFire facility at Fort Ross and Myers Grade would be there for the state mission because we have the fire history component out there, but maybe that's an excellent opportunity for an Amador engine that's right down the road from Timber Cove, and it gets you into Fort Ross in short order as well. So lots of different options. We're happy to be a part of the conversation and help wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from your team who has anything to say at this point, or are you the sole speaker?
I'm it. So for those,
right.
the group that don't know me, I run our operations here in Sonoma County. So Marshal Tuberville was also on the list, but he's the River Battalion that has responsibility for the North Coast there. But he's out burning Lake Sonoma Dam today. So he's in the wind. But that was one other thing that, speaking of Marshal and battalion chiefs, that some of the mergers across the county right now are fairly large footprints. And when you're talking about a chief officer for that footprint, that creates a very long response time for a battalion chief from one side of the county to the other. Whereas if you had a regional consolidation on the North Coast, now you've got a battalion chief that's in an area versus driving from one corner to the other. So,
well, thank you for that. Well, I'm glad you're part of this conversation too, to talk about what those options could be with your support. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you a chance to take a stretch break. We're going to give you 9 minutes. And if I look at my clock here, it looks like it's 4:38. So 9 minutes from then, we'll get started back again. And go ahead, feel free to turn off your camera, turn off your sound, and we'll get started back in 9 minutes. See you soon.
Potato chip crunching is hilarious.
Lisa, you about ready to start up again?
I'm ready when you are, boss.
I think I'm about ready. Getting my stuff organized here. Yeah.
Oops. What did I do?
Is everybody getting back on? We're still coming back. So Elise, how many folks do we have right now that are with us that are not panelists? Do we have many folks from the community?
We have 14 panelists and 25 attendees.
Okay, great. So
looking at the attendees, we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Probably a third are from fire teams, and the rest are unknown to me.
Okay, great. That's good to know. So it's good that we've got a good group of folks here. And what we're going to do in the last part of our meeting is, now that everyone's had a chance to kind of hear baseline where everybody is, what everybody's thinking about, to really, I'm going to ask some targeted questions, and I'm going to tell you what the questions are up front, and then we're going to break it down. I'm going to spend a few minutes on each question, getting your thoughts, getting your comments. And so we're going to ask members of the public to put their comments in the Q&A feature. So you'll see that at the bottom of your screen. You should be able just to click on that where it says Q&A, not the chat function, we're using Q&A, just to put your comments in there so that we can see what they are. And some of them we may address, some of them they just may be comments in general. And then panelists, if first of all, Supervisor Hopkins, if there's anything that you'd like to say in response to anything, we've got certainly time for that. And any comments that need response, if you want to raise your hand, any panelists, Elise can help me see who might be raising hands, but we don't want to get into too much conversation. We just want to really hear from the public and from all of you, and you all may type in the Q&A as well. So the questions that we're going to ask you is, they're up there on the screen, and we're going to ask you about, first of all, we're going to ask you about successes. What have you seen that's been really successful in terms of fire response in the area that you live in? And for those of you typing in, feel free just to say what area you're in, because we may not know what fire district that you're in. And then we're going to ask about unmet needs. What do you see as service gaps? What does the community see as service gaps? And this is a great opportunity for the community to kind of hear where everybody is with this, a good chance to hear right from you directly. And then we're going to ask about ideas that the community might have for engaging and supporting volunteers, and then any additional ideas on ways to get increased funding to support your operations. Certainly, if there's some volunteer grant writers out there, I'm sure they can lend a hand. And then we're going to then ask at the very end any additional questions that you might have regarding anything that you've heard today. So just want to make sure that that you get a chance to speak up about that. So let's go ahead and get started on that very first question that we have. I'm going to go ahead and put that slide up there so you can see what that is. And so we're going to look at the first one is the successes of fire response. So let's go ahead. Let's just put that first slide up that shows what it is that we're going to be asking about, and we're asking about the successes of the fire response in your community. Anything good you see going on there? And we see Scott Farmer has a comment, and he's saying that long-term viability is the issue. Strength of scale and voice that recognizes our volunteer culture and wildland imperatives, that which binds us, needs more exploration in this conversation. And what he's saying is that he envisions a single fire department stretching from the coast to the Mendocino line, east maybe as far as to include Northern County Fire Protection District and the wildlands north of the river service area. It would take time. CalFire is critical to the mix. A primary CalFire role with volunteer support can lead our region into long-term design that recognizes demographics and a dynamic response mix. Thank you for that. Any, while you're typing in any comments about any successes in fire response that you've seen, do any of our panelists have any comments on that one? Any panelists have any comments?
As far as successes, California has unfortunately all sorts of opportunity to exercise its mutual aid system. And so we're very good at that as a state. But here locally, when we're talking about contracts and all that good stuff, but auto aid agreements. So all of our agencies work hand in hand every day together. And so while Cazadero may not currently be under an Amador contract, we're under an auto aid agreement with Cazadero CSD to help aid on those day-to-day fires. So the relationships that we have on the North Coast are amazing, right? That we're all in to help each other in time of need.
Okay, thank you for that. I see Scott's following up with saying, in the night of lightning on the coast and inland was kept in check mostly by our volunteers on the point. Myers grade fire was much locally kept under control. Thanks for that again, Scott. So that's certainly a success that you've experienced. Anything else? Any other successes that anybody has seen out there? Elise,
BJ?
a comment? Yeah.
We asked our community for just sudden letters of support, and we got them yesterday and this morning and sent them into Elise, just so that we have these tremendous community support letters. They're thrilling to read.
Elise, I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you happen to have any of those offhand? I didn't know if that, I don't know if you've had a chance to see them. I know you've been in Guerneville today.
No, I've been here most of the day. I do have them.
That was
Do you want
yesterday.
me
You were in Guerneville. I'm so cute.
Do you want me to attempt to get them up with all the other?
No, I don't have to put them up. Just if there's any that you can read that are interesting, or even if Carolyn, you've got any that I'm sure you've got them. Any that are potentially interesting to share. Feel free.
Oh shit! I do.
Just go ahead
Let me
and
pull it up
and
just a
read
sec.
and read one or two lines that might be interesting to us. It's always good to hear those. We always hear a lot of complaints, don't we? So it's always good to get a
Suzanne Brown.
Okay. Here's one. Dear Supervisor Hopkins, this is from Suzanne Brown. As a very long time resident of our beautiful West County area, specifically the far reaches of the Timber Cove VFD, my family and I wish to go on record as saying we absolutely need continued support for our fire station. We own and run what has been known as Plantation Ranch and Farm Camp, a summer camp for children operating since 1952. The Timber Cove VFD is absolutely essential to this rural community. It's the community hub and unifying force for our entire community and is vital and necessary for our safety and well-being. She goes on with specifics, and it's long because there are so many specifics that are just kind of incredible.
That's great. That's great to hear that. Is there one more that you might want to share?
What, Erica's and trades.
Okay. Not right at the moment. I can't pull it right up.
That's okay, but thank you. I mean, we get the general idea, and it's wonderful that you've sent them into Elise to be able to share those with Supervisor Hopkins, and we'll go ahead and include those in our report that we're writing up as well, if that's okay with you, Carolyn.
I've got a comment on successes.
Yeah, Eric.
I would like to thank everybody involved with getting the repeater set up over at Woodside Campground. That's a real dead spot for radios and pagers out here. So cell phones have become a very, very important tool for us and for all the tourists to call in incidents that are on Highway 1. So we do a lot of texting back and forth. Even some of it is done with, I know up in North Sonoma coast, we can text and find out if they need to come down and help us out and stuff.
Thank
so
you.
That was a great success for our neck of the woods.
That's great. Thank you.
By the way, here's a wonderful testimonial from Mary Entrican. From a personal standpoint, we're so grateful for the quick response of the Timber Cove Fire Medical Squad when a family member was in a very bad car accident on one of our local roads. The car hit a tree and subsequently caught on fire. Our family member was knocked unconscious. Had it not been for the quick response of the fire and medical squad, the outcome could have been disastrous. If our department did not exist, it would take the nearest department outside of our district at least 45 minutes to respond. That would have been too late. We're forever grateful to these individuals who willingly serve the community and ask nothing in return.
Thanks, right?
Thank you for sharing that. That's good to hear. We're going to hear one more. I know Tony Goodwin has said Cazadero has seen the community come together. For example, the Walridge fire. Our community relies on volunteers, and we encourage small businesses to develop in our area the hopes that employees can serve as volunteers. And then Scott Farmer saying Mary's. So probably know what that is. Good. So there's also,
I have one I would like to contribute.
Yeah,
This
go
is
ahead.
Jackie Gardner.
Jackie, yeah.
I don't have any letters of support. That did not occur to us, but this past year we have managed to purchase and install 7 water tanks in the community of Annapolis because they don't have fire hydrants or anything there. And that has gone a long way in our ability to deal with the eastern parts of our service area.
That's great. Thank you. I want to shift over now to looking at some of our unmet needs that you've experienced. So I'm wondering if any of those folks out there in the community that are tuning in today here, if you've got any unmet needs that you've seen, and also for our panelists, are there any unmet needs? I know we've talked about some of those unmet needs certainly today, but is there anything that you're seeing in terms of needs that are out there that just aren't happening? Things that just aren't coming together. Anybody seeing anything out there? Young families. I think, do you mean that there aren't any young families? We don't see any, or they're having a tough time? Bonnie, Chief Lakos.
Yeah, we don't have some of the issues that other agencies have. Like we don't have a lot of public land. We don't have the issues that Timber Cove does, and Bodega Bay too. But we are, you know, our unmet need, I think I mentioned it before, was that since we don't really have any administrative staff, we're all volunteer, we find ourselves unable to support things that we really want to support in the community. You know, the bigger vegetation management projects, helping, you know, communities, you know, members get together and figure out how to get a grant, stuff like that. We really want to, but we just can't. So that's big. And also, I'll mention it again, a lot of TNT funds are generated out here and they don't come back. And that's a problem for us. It's a problem for Timber Cove, and a lot of good things could be done with that.
Got it. Well noted. Thank you for that. Chief Shepley, your thoughts on gaps?
Yeah, it's a bit of an echo of what Bonnie just said, and it really comes down to capacity to do some of the other tasks that are associated with the fire service. And the biggest one for me is looking at our ability to do some of those fire prevention efforts. The other one is both a success, but also a need. And the county red flag upstaffing program has been really impactful. But in the case of many of us on the call today, we don't have the capacity to house or sleep firefighters. So one of our biggest deficits is in the facilities realm. So both the success, but.
Got it. Thank you. And Scott Farmer's clarified, as we suspected, talking about young families, they're not moving in or staying here when they grow up. Housing costs, broadband, fewer short-term rentals. Thank you.
I have one more suggestion.
Yeah.
This is Carolyn. We got a wonderful grant to get a new chipper and had the training costs, all that stuff. It was just, we're ready to go, really work on fuel mitigation. And it also, the grant also said you must adhere to permit requirements, and that stopped the whole thing. So we would like to see pressure from the community on the county to get common sense permit solutions. Right now, everybody is just stopped.
Okay, thank you for that. What else? Anything else? I see something here from, let's see, many years ago, someone has typed in here that I can see it in the chat though. Some years ago, my son had a viral infection. He has a form of asthma that's specifically agitated by viral infections. His oxygen level was sub 80. Without local volunteer EMTs, we never would have received oxygen in a reasonable amount of time. And that gave us time, needed to get him to an emergency room where they could continue treatment. So thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful success story. And there are many of those that we have, certainly on the coast. What else? Anything else in terms of gaps in service? See Scott saying second on housing for firefighters in station. What else? Anything else? Any gaps you're seeing other than what we talked about? If not, we're going to go move on to another topic. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's the same thing that Shepley just said. We don't have a residential fire station, and that's big money. We do have early, plans we've been working on for a long time to extend ours, but long term down the road, we need to expand our fire station so people can actually sleep there. And so that is a deficit that we would like to be able to fix.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Plakos, for that.
One more thing that would be nice just to acknowledge is the presence of Henry 1 and the CHP rescue helicopters. Absolutely, they're both a must out here on the coast. They do a tremendous amount of work for us.
Thank you. Chief Shepley, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the challenges that's shared by everyone on this call is the long response time for EMS. And I think at some point in this conversation, that component needs to be added, and maybe Coast Ambulance should be involved in this conversation, because I've always envisioned an opportunity to have another unit on the southern portion of their response area. And that may come further down in this conversation, but it should be a component, and it's definitely a challenge for all of us.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk to Supervisor Hopkins about that and see how she wants to address that. But thanks for bringing that up. What we want to do now is we want to switch topics. Let's move to talking about engaging and supporting volunteers. What are some thoughts that you might have on what we can do? What are some maybe creative things that we can do, things we've not tried, things maybe you've heard from other parts of the world that they're doing to engage and support their volunteers? What are thoughts that you have on that? Or what are the needs that we have? Obviously, there's a high need for the volunteers. What are your thoughts?
Well, with Timber Cove, our reimbursement program, it was incredible. When we had funds we were able to fund about half of the program. The volunteers really appreciated it. Getting up in the middle of the night, missing a day of work, or skipping your doctor appointment or dentist appointment so that you could run on calls. It'd be nice to give them a little something. It really went a long ways.
Okay.
So for us to keep that happening would really be a great program.
Okay, so you'd like that stipend program back again. Other thoughts on ways to attract and engage and keep your volunteers? Something you wish you could do? Yeah.
All right, it's something that we already do, but I just want to mention it because in the context of things that might happen on the coast, because I know we do this and Timber Cove does this, and I think for us is this, just that we have to recognize that not every volunteer, especially the older volunteers, can do everything. And we have a priority that everyone needs to be safe and trained appropriately. But in some environments, the requirement is that volunteers have to be able to do everything, or they can't do anything. They can't volunteer. And you won't get your people that way. So we have people that are, good EMTs, and they can drive apparatus and they can run pumps, but they can't go on the roof. And or they're not going to be building the hosely up the hill. But so we recognize that. We tell people, we train people to stay in their lane and do what they are trained to do and what is safe for them to do. But agencies that force volunteers to go to the same level of training in every respect as career firefighters are just going to lose volunteers.
So it's not a one size fits all. You really customize.
Not a one size fits all. You have to have, safety first and training first, and really respect your people, and don't have people do what they can't do, but let them do what they can.
Thank you for that. I see a comment that's coming from Scott, and then I'm going to get to Damien's comment. Scott Farmer saying training for remote residents is a barrier to joining since it's so far to town. And Tony Goodwin's adding to provide volunteers housing via low impact living, tiny homes, and they provide hours of coverage each month. Great. Want to get some of those creative ideas. Thank you for that, Tony. Damien, what did you want to add?
Mostly I want to echo what Bonnie is saying, allowing for volunteers that don't fit a traditional full-scale role. And as well, in terms of attracting volunteers, when growing up out here, one of the common summertime activities would be having the community out to do a little training, how to make a fire line, how to run the fire engine, how to work the pump, get the hose going, how to spray water on a fire, etc. And I think that kind of engagement in communities like this that are sparse can really help people to open up ideas about what they could do within a volunteer fire department and allow for some of that engagement that Bonnie was talking about, where you have volunteers who can't fill all of the roles, but they can do something. And that just adds to the totality of what we can provide to our own communities ourselves.
Thank you for that. Chief
TJ, may I
Shepley.
build on that?
Yeah, go ahead and build on that. And then we want to get to Chief Shepley. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we've been thinking on occasion about community participation in a regional disaster preparedness exercise, because we really have one road and you don't know whether to go north or south. And when communications are down, what do you do? So it would be nice to really have all the communities come together.
Okay. Wonderful. You're getting so many ideas. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that, Carolyn. Chief Shepley, and then Damien, I don't know if your hand's still up from before or not. So Chief Shepley.
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful things you could do is provide really good training and expand the training opportunities. This has already been mentioned, bring the training opportunities to the coast. Our stipend program in North Bay Fire has been really effective and has improved response times, but it hasn't been spread or offered to all the North Bay stations. Again, housing and facilities is one of the limitations, and then funding to some extent. And then the other way has also been mentioned, but how to engage as many people in a variety of ways. One example would be to extend defensible space inspections so that maybe a non-responding volunteer could facilitate in educating their neighbor and making all those inspections occur. And then I think there's an opportunity at some point. There used to be a fire camp in Fort Ross, but I imagine a partnership with either Kashaya or other public lands where we could have a work center where there's training and the ability to have a crew somewhere on the coast would be really effective. It might bring young people to the community. It'd be an opportunity to house them and inundate the community with some younger folks that would have training and work opportunities and ultimately enhance the fire safety on the coast.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So another question I want to ask you, I want to move out of volunteers and talk a little bit about raising funds. We've addressed that just a little bit. I know some of you talked about grants and a lot of you said you needed funds and you're just not going to be able to afford some of the things that you need to. What are some ideas that you might have on ways that you can raise funds to support the work of our fire agencies? What ideas do you have? Things that you should try, things that might be creative, things you're willing to do yourself if you're a member of the community out there. So give us your thoughts on raising funds, fundraising. It's always a hot topic, fundraising. For those of you, let me ask, for those of you who do write grants, how are you able to do that?
Chuck, you're now allowed to talk.
Okay, do I have it on?
Yep.
Yes, I didn't put my name in correctly. I'm Chuck Breyer. I'm the Assistant Chief for North Sonoma Coast. I just had a comment about with the volunteer, how to support volunteers. And I think a good way that could be the businesses, the small business owners that are volunteers and their employees. If there's, I know it would be larger than the county, but some tax relief for them, for responding to these fires, or, for their employees. So that way, when they go on these fires for free, they can keep getting paid. If there's something the county can do to help those employers, I think could be a big help.
Thank you. Love those creative ideas. We really need to hear them. Sales tax. Tony is saying a sales tax in terms of a way to bring in some funding. Thank you for that, Tony. Any other ideas with funding, ways to get additional funding?
We've got special events out here, charge a fee that would go to the districts impacted by the special events. With state and county parks, add a fee that would cover fire and medical services.
Okay.
About that recovery issue.
I'm understanding, BJ, that there's a robust discussion around the question of mitigation fees. That some feel that charging fees for service is an important piece, and others are really concerned about that trend. Is this a good time to check in on that fundraising concept?
That's a great idea. So let's talk about that. What do you think, pro or con? What do you think about those mitigation fees?
Well, from Timber Cove, we just passed one, and we also do not charge our residents, and we reserve the right not to bill.
Okay. Thank you for weighing in on that. Any other thoughts on mitigation fees? Good idea, bad idea? Won't work in our area? What do you think?
We just lost too many dollars in supplies on medical calls. It all leaves and it's gone.
Okay.
So
ahead.
I'm a member of the public sitting next to Jackie Gardner.
Okay.
My name is Marty Campbell. I think in various parts of the coast, the large amount of public land that attracts tourists, and those properties don't pay any taxes. That's has a tremendous effect on the fire districts in those areas that provide emergency services. This doesn't so much apply to the North Sonoma coast area, where we don't have those public areas. But this is something that is really broken in our administrative structure of the county, that the Coastal Act and LCP don't permit affordable housing to be built. So working people who support the tourists who visit the coast don't have anywhere to live. So we have a staff shortage here. And there's the Coastal Act and local coastal plan put up roadblocks to providing vegetation management, the permit issue that Carolyn Abst raised about the chipping effort that Timber Cove tried to implement. And we generate, up here at Sea Ranch, we generate a huge amount of TOT funds. Those funds go into wherever they go, but we don't see them coming back to us. And that has also been a big issue in Bodega Bay. And they aren't represented here because they aren't part of the unresolved fire protection issues, but that's a big deal for them too. And that funding disconnect of services to the coast when the coast is generating money for the county. I serve on the MAC, and a couple of years ago, we had people from the county who manage the TOT money come and talk about how it was spent. It's spent on marketing for more tourists to come. And providing money to mitigate the impact of all those visitors is not part of the equation. And I think if that could be part of the equation, it could help us with the fire and emergency services.
Thank you for that, Marty. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
comments. I know Damien has a comment. Before we get to Damien, I just want to read two comments from the public. Tony Goodwin says it could help back to the, I think, mitigation. It could help make people accountable for unnecessary calls and mitigation fees. According to Michael Nichols, mitigation fees may work well for districts unable to pass parcel taxes. So I see that Damien has a comment, and then Supervisor Hopkins. Damien.
Yeah, just on the mitigation fees, I'd like to understand more about what that would mean for your local resident. And at the same time, I agree with Mike Nichols that in lieu of a parcel tax, that would be possibly a one way to resolve part of the problem. And then out on the coast, really the tourism impact, I think, is the bigger issue. We don't have that so much inland here.
Great.
But I would like to understand the impact of that to local residents, just because we have quite a few folks out here who are older and don't have the kind of income needed to maybe handle something if it were too expensive. So.
Thank you. Maybe Supervisor Hopkins can address that with her comments. Supervisor Hopkins.
I wanted to start, if it was okay, with just the TOT issue that has been raised a number of times, most recently by Marty. On May 24th, as the Board of Supervisors has done for, I don't know, I mean, I think at least a couple of decades, the Sonoma County Tourism Bureau was allocated 1.25% of the first 9% of transient occupancy tax generated by unincorporated communities. That amounted to $2.67 million. I was successful in getting an extraordinarily small portion of TOT revenue of the new sort of 3% that was passed just prior to me joining the Board of Supervisors, which really only amounts to a couple $100,000 a year for the 5th District. So, you know, I do want to acknowledge that that is absolutely accurate, that right now $2.7 million a year goes to Sonoma County Tourism to generate more visitors, and we receive basically pennies in terms of tourism impact mitigation. I'd also like to note that the Sonoma County Tourism is actually currently proposing to do two things to increase their revenue. One would be to add 1% to their BIA, which is their sort of business improvement assessment. And that does go through the county, but it's sort of a specific thing where they kind of vote to tax themselves, essentially. So they're asking for a 1% increase, and they're also asking to eliminate the threshold, because right now the BIA, which is additional revenue that's non-general fund that they also collect, only applies to businesses that net or maybe gross more than $350,000 a year. So they're looking at sort of eliminating that threshold so they would essentially be able to collect from vacation rentals and sort of smaller units as well. So I have asked them, you know, would you be willing to give up the general fund contributions that you're receiving so that could go back into the communities if we were supportive of, you know, that increase in 1% and eliminating the threshold, because that would actually generate, if they did both of those things, more than the $2.67 million a year they're currently receiving of what would otherwise be general fund for the county. And they want both of it, you know, they want all of it. But I think that's an important conversation for the community, and that will be coming back to the Board of Supervisors at some point. But that is, again, currently $2.67 million a year of general funds. And could you remind me of what the other question that I was supposed to answer from Damien is? Because I got distracted and I was pulling up my research from sort of the past agenda items.
Mitigation fees, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah. So mitigation fees, and this is something that kind of the attorneys get all kind of hot and bothered about, which is, you know, what is sort of a fee versus a tax? And there's a legal definition of this. So essentially, if you're going to go for a fee instead of a tax, you have to prove that the impact is sort of actually commensurate with the fee that you are imposing. So for instance, actually before annexation, Bodega Bay had successfully imposed a fee on vacation rentals and hotels that sort of increased their contribution to the fire protection district. And so that might be a model that is worth considering. And sort of the argument was, you know, having more people in these places, and also maybe people who are not as familiar with wildfire risk, perhaps that, you know, increases the impacts and the calls for service from the district. But it is something that can be subject to litigation if you get it wrong. A tax, on the other hand, is something that we, you know, you have the opportunity to vote down, but also the opportunity to vote for. And so then that doesn't have to sort of show a direct link in terms of the, you know, kind of impacts for mitigating a particular incident. So.
Got it. Okay. Anything else you want to add at this point, or are we going to go back to our questions?
No, I just wanted to sort of honor and acknowledge kind of the reality of what's happening with TOT dollars. And I can also provide a full spreadsheet at another time, sort of where all of those different dollars go.
Great. Thank you. I noticed that Scott Farmer has asked people to be open and creative, and this opportunity is valuable. And I appreciate him saying that, because it is important for everyone to be as creative as possible, because we're really looking for some good solutions for our work here. the last question that we want to ask everybody is, in general, what additional thoughts do you have? Any ideas, questions, comments regarding anything that you heard today? Do you feel encouraged that we're at this place that we're talking about these things? Are there roadblocks that are going to happen that we should be aware of? What do you think as we embark on this process to at least discuss the ways to handle this situation on the coast? Thoughts, anything you heard about today? Anyone from
This is Carolyn.
Yes, Carolyn.
And I do like the idea that I've heard discussions in the past, and I don't hear those discussions. I hear discussions about going forward, and that's really wonderful. And the idea of coalitions where you can come together and still retain your identity, I think is fantastic. One other idea that someone here had is that when we go after grants, we go after the easy ones because it takes so much time. And if we could get administrative help somehow, we could go after more difficult and bigger ones. And maybe we could do that across the whole region. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you for participating. We really appreciate it. I see Michael Nichols is saying Sonoma County Fire does have a template for mitigation fees, which has been implemented within their jurisdiction for the past year and a half. So maybe we can grab that. Maybe you already know about that, Elise, but maybe we can go ahead and grab that and look to see what that's all about. Any other thoughts, any comments on anything you saw today? Yes, Chief Nichols.
Yeah, I was just going to put that out there earlier, that's my familiarity with mitigation fees, is that it's tied to development. So Sonoma County Fire District and Sonoma Valley Fire District have that mitigation fee in place. But to Paul Berry's comment earlier about the lack of new construction in the areas that we're talking about today, you don't have the amount of new construction to generate those fees. And those are fairly substantial in those two districts. I believe it's about $3,000 per new home that's being built. So you're putting a lot of weight onto individuals to carry the community.
Thank you for clarifying that. Other thoughts about anything in general that you've heard today? Any thoughts in general?
Mike Nichols is contributing that Sonoma County Fire does have a template for mitigation fees, which maybe people would be interested in looking at.
Absolutely. Anything else?
And to Supervisor Hopkins' comment earlier, those mitigation fees for the construction, a lot of times the agencies that use that, it's to her point about it being specifically for one-offs. It's not for salary, so it's new apparatus, new stations, but it's not, my understanding of mitigation fees is it's not supposed to cover day-to-day operations.
Okay, thank you.
Good to know. Jackie Gardner has her hand raised.
Jackie's a comment, and then
I appreciate the opportunity to have this meeting, and I think that probably most of the fire chiefs all know what condition each other's departments are in, but it's nice to be sharing that information. On the other hand, it's discouraging to see that there's so many facilities in desperate need of updating and no monies to do that. And yet we're talking about TOT funds going away and public lands that don't contribute anything. And here we are talking about how can you raise funds? And I really think we all need more help from Sonoma County to solve some of the deficiencies in facilities so that we can do our best here on the coast where we all live.
Thank you. Supervisor Hopkins, did you want to make your comments now or at the very end?
No. I have some other little points on fees, but I'll wrap that into my comments at the end.
Okay, great. What we want to do is, I do see one comment here. Michael McNichols is saying, believes that the county fire is charging $250 per call regarding medical dispatches, which is subject to waiver and offset by individuals' medical insurance. So thank you for posting that. I just want to share a little bit about what's in store for us in the future. So let's go ahead and we want to look at things that, and we're going to give you some homework, right? There's no such thing as getting out of this without any homework. So in the future, we're going to be having at least 2 additional meetings, and we'll do probably some polling, at least. I don't know, is that something maybe we can do some doodle polling to see what might be some good days and times and format. I know we love in-person meetings, but sometimes the fact that we're meeting on Zoom, we can accomplish a lot in a short period of time, and you don't have to travel.
You know what
So
that means?
we'll decide what makes sense for you.
What's an acceptable option?
And then we're going to look at 3 questions for your homework. Number 1, I want you to get together. First of all, look at those last 2 questions. Is the board, are the board and your responders aligned? We want to make sure that when you come to the next meeting, that we're going to have about 2 or 3 people per fire agency come together. Not everybody in the whole world. We just want a small working group of people that can actually make decisions coming together. And we're going to ask you to think about 3 things. What is your ideal future? What's the thing, if you could have anything, you want, I mean, given our limitations, the reality of life, right? But what is your ideal future? What do you really want? And then number 2, to think about what's an acceptable option. If you can't get exactly what you want, what can you live with? What scenario is something that makes sense that you can live with? And then the third thing I want you to think about as a board and responders together is what scenario is just absolutely impossible to accept? What could you not accept going forward in terms of reorganization, staying where you are, getting assistance from other entities? What is something that just would not work for you or your community? It's important that you come back to the next meeting when we're together, that the board and the responders are aligned. We don't want to be having the board and the responders disagreeing in the next meeting together. Not that you are here, but I'm saying we really want you unified, united as an organization when you come to the table with the other organizations, so that you know what you want, or at least you've got an idea of what you want. And then, is the community aligned with your vision? I noticed in some of your comments today, some of you said the community would want this, the community would not want that. That's really important to think about, especially if you're very volunteer driven. The community or in the community supports what you do financially. Obviously, it's very important that all of us are in sync with our community. So it's important to think about that. So that is where you're going with that. You'll be in touch with Elise. I'm sure you all know Elise, and Elise is in touch with you all the time about other matters. So with that, I'm just going to thank you so much for your participation today. I'll be putting together a summary report to turn over to Supervisor Hopkins and to the rest of you. And I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Hopkins to send us on our way and get it all finalized.
Thank you so much, BJ, and thank you for your excellent work facilitating, and thanks to Elise for all of your work that went into preparing for this meeting. I did want to say that I stand corrected by Chief Nichols on the fees. There are actually 3 different types of fees that we deal with in local government. And the mitigation fees are specific to development. So that's where we have like affordable housing or parks or kind of one-time fees to say, hey, you're now joining a system that other people have already paid into and you need to pay your fair share. There are also the sort of fees that are governed by Prop 218, which is sort of another type of a fee affiliated with properties. And then there's also fees that could be imposed as part of like a licensing program. So say, for instance, a vacation rental or business license. But again, all of those fees are sort of governed by like pretty stringent rules in terms of justifying what the cost is, and also ensuring that you're sort of not overly taxing the new person, the last person to the system, and kind of making sure that there's equitable distribution of the revenue collection. So on that note, I do feel the strong need for creative solutions, and I really do appreciate that folks have been forward looking. And I want to end on a note of optimism, which is that we know that we have challenges on the North Coast, but we also have a group of people who are deeply committed to solving that and who really do want to see return to source funding to help drive these solutions forward. So I look forward to exploring all of those different kind of policy and funding options with you once you all create that vision for what you really believe sustainable, effective fire services look like for the North Coast. So thank you for all of your expertise, all of your dedication to the community, and I can't wait to work with all of you on this.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, and I think this is the awkward moment where we don't have a parking lot to hang out in with a cooler full of beer, but next time. So at least in person, we can certainly
Exactly. That's great. Elise, if you want to stay on afterward, just real quick, touch base if you want any feedback, or we can debrief. if you want to, real quick.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much.
everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks so
Great
much.
to meet
Take care.
all of you. Looking forward to working with you.